Hi guys, and welcome back to Podcasting Cars. It is me, Zach from Nerdux Media. I can never get these intros consistent, but here we are anyway. In today's video, two things. Obviously the topic for today's video, which is going to be the best starter mods that you can get for your car. However, I did just want to quickly mention this month right now, when I'm posting this, is Men's Mental Health Month. So I'm going to put a little timestamp somewhere over here, I guess, if you guys aren't interested in hearing. But I thought I'd just quickly discuss that for those of you who may be having a little bit of a hard time. So I'm not going to hang on this topic for very long, for those of you who are here for this bit. I just wanted to say, there are people out there thinking of you. I'm one of them. If you are having a hard time right now and you need somebody to speak to, hit me up on Instagram. There's always a link in my description, or hit me up in the comment section. We can have a chat. I'm more than happy to have a chat if you're having a little bit of a hard time right now. I've been through my fair share of terrible, awful times that have sent me. So yeah, it's all about trying to be there for somebody when, especially, you know what they've been through. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, hanging off the topic now, because let's try pick up the mood and talk about cool car stuff. So yeah, cool car stuff. Cool. So I wanted to discuss in today's video the best starter mods that you can get for your car, as well as obviously then kind of progressing into the more fancier stuff later on, and so on and so forth. But yeah, because I've seen a lot of this. I suppose it happens a lot with the BMWs and Audis and Golfs and so on and so forth, where they take their car in for a stage 1 tune, bro, which I still don't to this day understand what that means, but anyway. And my point is, though, you get a whole bunch of horsepower, but then the rest of the car is basically not set up for it. So sure, cool, you're on the highway and you can now clock 280 kilometers per hour instead of 230. Amazing. Brilliant. Yeah. But when you try to take a corner, your car is still just as capable as it was before. So I wanted to talk a lot about personally what I find to be better starter mods, even though not necessarily I followed these rules, but yeah. A lot of guys land up doing, an exhaust and an intake first, which is fine. Personally, the car's stock performance, generally speaking, as you're getting used to the car, is fine. Rather just leave it. So don't do an intake, don't do a tune, don't do an exhaust. Leave that all stock. I understand you want the louds, you want the pops and crackles, you want the induction noises. I get you, 100%. But that was a mistake that I made. Not that, it adds much horsepower, especially for a naturally aspirated build, especially one like mine, where it's 90 horsepower from factory. You're not getting much out of it. And it's essentially a hot air intake, because my intake was right next to my exhaust. Anyway, my point being, an intake and exhaust is a good setup, but personally what I'd recommend is you do a good set of coilovers first, because then you can bring down the car's ride is stiffer, you can play with the car a lot more, of which, trust me, you'll actually have a more enjoyable experience than you would if you had the pops and crackles because of a nice exhaust, or an intake or something like that. So in my personal opinion, coilovers are probably, or at least lowering springs, should be your first bet. Now, proper coilover setups can be quite expensive, especially here in this country. I do tend on making, I think I've mentioned this before in some of my videos, I do intend on making and actually producing coilovers locally for the NA MX-5s, and then so on and so forth. Unfortunately, just for right now, I need money, basically, in short. So yeah. But yeah, no. For right now, we're looking at just some basic things. So I'll say maybe just lowering springs, which is kind of what my car has in right now. Or more so, I'd be suggesting kind of like what Callum is. Obviously, I'm speaking from MX-5 perspective, because I own one. But this goes for a lot of cars. I'm sure Tay, if you're watching and you're in the comments, he has a Suzuki Swift Sport. I'm sure he'll be right on my side here. with what I'm saying. Although I believe he left his completely stock until he had enough money to do exhaust, intake, suspension, sway bars, like everything all at once. But my meaning is, a nice suspension setup you'll actually probably end up enjoying more, because you'll be able to play with the car a lot more. Like, the car will just handle so much better immediately, like off the bat for you, especially if you're still like new to the car. It'll suddenly just feel like a new car to you. So, or whilst an exhaust and an intake, it will feel, yeah, sure, like a faster version of your car, but it won't necessarily feel like an entirely new car. So yeah. Additionally to that, then I'd say wheels. Obviously, for me, that was a very big thing, because stock MX-5 wheels are like this skinny. So getting a nice set of, well, a new rim setup that obviously it's slightly wider, and then obviously tire setup to match that, and obviously grippy tire setup, it was an absolute night and day difference. Like, to be 100% honest with you, my stock car with the stock rims felt how my car now with the turbo feels with essentially daily tires, so not semis or anything like that. Like, I could spin the wheels and stuff. It's an open diff, so it had like nothing to do, but I could like spin the tires reasonably easy, and there was like no grip. Okay, admittedly the previous owners put like some really cheap shit tires on, so like you could try turn and the car would just like not grip whatsoever. So I definitely highly recommend a good set of tires and a good set of rims. I know, okay, for example, I'm running, technically speaking, reps. They're A-Line, which is a local brand, a local company. They're not necessarily actually reps of anything. They're just a particular style, so on and so forth. You guys have seen from the pictures and stuff. I do intend on changing them for different A-Lines, though. Now, a lot of people say, oh, stay away from reps, stay away from the cheaper rims, because they can bend and crack and kill themselves very easily. Which I agree with, but what I've learned is a lot of people, especially locally, who have been shitting on this particular rim brand, they run like a tire profile that's like this. So yeah, when you hit a pothole, it's gonna like bend the rim. So yeah, it's kind of to be expected. If you have, I mean, I've hit some potholes where I genuinely thought, there goes like my lower control arm, it's torn off my wheel kind of setup. And no, my rims have handled it completely fine, and it's just because I've got a nice tire setup where it's nice and meaty. It's got some movement and flex in the tire wall, so it holds it fine. So just be careful of what tires you're looking at, is my meaning. I run Hankooks on my car. I'm a very big supporter of their stuff. I really enjoy their tires so far, and my dad's had a lot of good experience with them as well. I'll go into properly tires and tire specs and stuff maybe in a separate video, but for now let's move past that. So yeah, the customer's just pulled up. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm just going to continue filming. So my meaning is that tires and suspension, basically your grip stuff, your handling stuff, I feel like is far more important, and you'll enjoy those upgrades so much more. For example, again, just doing the tire setup, I could throw my car into corners like there was no tomorrow. I was so impressed with my car's handling just because of tires. Slightly wider, and then there we go. Well, slightly wider and grippier tires, because like I said, the previous owners had really shit quality tires. So it felt fantastic to just throw my car into corners and stuff. So I was very impressed with that. You could argue that sway bars are then next on the line. I'd argue it depends on the car. For example, if your car was primarily focused on being like a casual driver kind of thing, for example, a Mazda 323, for example. There's a couple guys here that spruce them up and put FE swaps in them. FE turbos or FE just normal FEs, naturally aspirated FEs. So I'm just making sure the customer is going to be dealt with my dad. If it is an FE, is my camera slipping? Okay, I think it's fine. You know, you could argue sway bars, but I'm gonna go off things like Suzuki Swift Sports, NA MX5s, and even with a 323, like I feel like sway bars are like next level shit. Like you don't need to do that immediately and like off the line and stuff. So yeah, what was an upgrade for me that I really enjoyed was I did the limited slip diff in my car. Okay, sorry, my dad started talking to the customer and it was being a bit loud. What was I saying? So sway bars I feel like are... Oh no, wait, I was talking about the diff, sorry. So for an NA MX5, the ones that come with open diff, a limited slip diff is definitely a really big upgrade that you should look at early in your modding progression. Although a lot of cars, obviously, that we would be discussing in this list are not necessarily, they don't need that. They usually come with limited slip diffs off the bat, so you don't really have to worry. What else? I'd say after you've done a fair amount of suspension, essentially grip work, so your tires, coilovers, lowering springs, if you're in an MX5, a limited slip diff, then I'd say, alright, cool, now you can start looking at like some of the more performance orientated stuff. For example, again, an exhaust with headers maybe as well, an intake, full induction piping, so on and so forth. Because yeah, I think that will be, you know, pretty good. And maybe like just a basic tune to add that extra, you know, now that you've got a more free-flowing exhaust and a more aggressive intake, you know, a tune to set that up properly. Then I'd say, yeah, no, 100%, that's 100% valid, and that should run pretty nicely. But then you have to be cautious, because especially for older cars like my own, adding any extra performance, even, you know, stock performance, depending on its age, you can start to have blow-by issues, which is why, even though I had a fresh rebuild, because I turbocharged it, I thought, let's put a catch can. So that's definitely a mod that I'd recommend. I feel like it's a very undervalued mod, because it doesn't add any performance and doesn't make it louder, doesn't make it sound cooler, doesn't do much else. If anything, it actually just makes your engine bay look a little bit messier, because now there's extra pipes and so on and so forth. It's a really good mod to have, especially if you're driving an old clapped JDM shitbox or Euro shitbox. I'm not here to judge. So my meaning is, you know, you could very easily land up damaging your engine if you don't have one. Unless it's a full rebuild. A full rebuild, I'll excuse it. But again, we're just talking about starter mods here. You've just picked up the car, you've got a couple cash extra. I'd highly recommend picking up a catch can, probably even before you do the exhaust and stuff like that. But it's only really, I suppose, necessary once you've done all the extra performance mods, because now there's extra performance. So a catch can would definitely be up there. If you're a naturally aspirated build, I wouldn't really recommend going turbocharged until you've like properly gotten used to how the car handles, so you're used to the suspension setup. Once you're used to the suspension setup, then I'd recommend, okay, you understand the car, you understand the grip limitations, irrelevant of boost, so you can handle the car perfectly well. You should be fine. Then I'd say charge in with boost. You can go with boost, but because I know that's what everyone's waiting for. Everyone's waiting until I say the turbocharger. Honestly, I'd recommend waiting for the turbo to be like last. Keep the turbo last. In perspective, let me put it this way. What I originally wanted to do with my car, because I had actually written out stages for my car. See, but I knew what stages meant. And what I wanted to do was basically all of the supporting mods, and then the very last thing that I wanted to do was rebuild the engine and turbocharge it. So I wanted to do all the aero, so the wings, the lips, the lights, so on and so forth. I wanted to do all of that first because lower profile headlights, more aerodynamic, less fuel wasting because I have to have the headlights up at night whilst I'm driving. The lip, technically, I suppose that would make that counterintuitive. But anyway, the lip focuses airflow to my brakes, better for performance-orientated stuff, better cooling, so on and so forth. Slotted brakes, my calipers got restored. That's actually also something I'd like to mention. If you have a older car and the brakes are giving you issues, that would be one of the very first things that I touch on. Go get yourself a quality set of brake pads and go get your brake calipers restored. You don't necessarily have to go with a Woolwood big brake kit, 6-pot pistons in the front that, your car's going to stop now. You don't have to stress that much about it, but I would definitely highly recommend looking at least restoring your brakes. For MX-5s anyway, considering the fact that we haven't actually got a roof and this little beam here is not necessarily the strongest thing in the world, I'd highly recommend that we also look at doing like roll bars, but make sure you get a quality set. There's a chrome set that like just attaches here and like on the sides and stuff, and I've seen pictures of that actually like folds forward and decapitates you, so that's lovely. So I'd recommend like a proper quality set that like properly hard mounts into the car's body and stuff, so if you roll, it's going to save your life. So that would be a very high thing that I recommend for MX-5 owners. And I understand that, normal cars don't have this issue, but soft top cars do, so yeah. I'd recommend a high quality set of seats, like some buckets and stuff, because again, now that you've got that upgraded handling from the tires and the suspension, you might find that the car is actually a bit you don't feel very secure in the car when you're taking corners and stuff. I've already felt this when I take my car to autocross. I get flicked around in my car a bit. Callum actually also really argues with this, because when he's got semi-slicks on, so even grippier tires, he gets flung about the car like there's no tomorrow. So he really wants a set of aftermarket seats, so something to consider, I suppose. I understand that, genuine brides or genuine Sparkos and stuff like that are very, very, very expensive. So I do understand cutting a bit of a corner there, but don't, you cut too many corners and now you're sitting with a cheapo set that's gonna like fold and crack if you get into an accident, and then it's gonna break your back. That's a bad idea. Try still get a good quality set and a good quality set of harnesses as well. So yeah. That's a whole bunch of safety stuff. I'm sure someone out there is waiting for me to say, some speakers and a good set radio. I never cared to really get a radio for my car. I'm sure you guys remember when my dad finally got me this Bluetooth setup. I was very happy because it had been something that I wanted to buy for myself for a bit. But especially like speakers, sound is not my thing, okay? I don't really care for sound. My glorious sound comes from under there and behind there and shoots flames every now and then. I don't really care for, I want to obviously hear my music rather than nothing, or the radio. But I didn't really care for anything past that. So, yeah. What else was a good quality mod that I've done? I've mentioned brake pads. That's actually also, I'd probably put that again well before the exhaust and the intake and stuff. A good set of quality brake pads, oh my word, it's a night and day difference. You'll feel that instantly. Your car feels so much more responsive to brake and so on and so forth. That was a very good mod that I even underestimated. I didn't do brakes until I did the slotted brakes and the caliper restoration and stuff, which I left too late, admittedly, and that was an absolutely fantastic mod that I had done. I will never undervalue brakes ever again. Is there anything else? obviously, I suppose once you have all the supporting mods, you've got your suspension dialed in, you've got maybe a nice classy radio that you can listen to music, maybe not necessarily speakers, but I suppose if you're more biased that way, speakers, good set of quality tires and brakes. If you're a Miata, roll cage, or roll bar I should say, and limited slip diff. Once you've gotten that kind of stuff set up, then I'd recommend, if you want to start spicing up the exterior, a lip kit, so on and so forth, like body kit stuff, for better airflow, or simply just because it looks nice, to be honest with you, then I'd say, yeah, sure, go ahead. But it's at this point that I'm kind of like, you can choose your route at this point. You can go for the body stuff and then later do more performance, or you can do more performance stuff and then again later come back to the body stuff. For me personally, at this point is where I'd be like, okay, let's take a break from the performance. Again, let's get used to the car and how it performs now that I've got a little bit extra power. Again, obviously, if the car is from factory turboed, a slight tune can probably increase 100 horsepower to 200 horsepower sometimes. Like, you can get a lot of horsepower out of the stock car sometimes, especially with supporting mods. So my meaning is, get used to the car again, enjoy the car again, feel it out, get used to it, how does it handle, blah blah blah. Then you can be like, okay, cool, now let's jump into performance. So whilst you're doing that, you may as well throw money at visual stuff, lips and so on and so forth, because they do make the slightest bit of difference. Not really, to be honest, or especially for us tuners, or at very least how I've tuned my car, which is more of an autocross build, toge build, where top speed is pretty much irrelevant, so aero is not that big a factor. It does play a role, but very little, and you need like quite aggressive aero for it to play a role. So yeah, I'd say just put some cosmetics on, you'll be fine with that. Now comes the big boy. If you're naturally aspirated, obviously going turbo, or if you're already turbocharged, maybe going a bit more aggressive, a larger turbo and so on and so forth. Yes, again, this is where I have personal recommendations because I lived through it. You never know what the previous owner's done, so I'd recommend a full rebuild, and then at that point you may as well save up, again enjoying the car as much as you can beforehand, but you may as well save up the money and then just forge the engine, basically make it a fully reliable setup that you could run double the horsepower that you're actually looking to run. But yeah, because I didn't do that necessarily, I just went for a stock internal build, but that's because I never planned on really running more horsepower than what I wanted, and these engines are reliable at that horsepower range. So personally what I felt is I'll just go with a stock input, or stock engine but turbocharged, which some of you guys may be able to get away with anyway. But personally what I'd recommend is, if you have the availability that, like, okay, so the car's not like broken or damaged or anything, you don't have to rebuild it, I'd personally recommend that you rebuild it anyway when you're starting to add more horsepower, because there's no point in making it make an extra 200 horsepower, maybe even more if you start going a bit aggressive, and now all of a sudden the car's, you drive it for like 6 months and then you've blown a piston because too much boost or something, I don't know. But my meaning is, that's where I'd start to look at it and be like, okay, rebuild time. Or again, this is valid as well, if you want to keep it naturally aspirated, this is the point to look at like ICBs, and instead of just like a cone filter on an intake pipe. So you could go ITBs, as well as then also look at things like different compression pistons and different valve flows and so on and so forth, so that you can make the naturally aspirated build as powerful as you want. Again, I suppose this also goes for turbo guys. You could also overhaul the valves, overhaul the block. That's kind of what I'm saying. Go for a full overhaul, make sure the engine's in good condition, you could run, for example, if I had the money to forge my engine, I'd still be running plus minus the same horsepower. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'd probably be running about 250 wheel horsepower on low boost and about 300 horsepower on high boost. But that's even a bit excessive for these cars. The chassis doesn't like it. It's too much. The back end becomes too squirrely, unless you're running semi-slicks. But my point. So, you know, I'd probably end up doing that, but I would have built it that it would have been like 600 horsepower capable. I wouldn't land up running that amount of power because, yeah, but I have the safety of mind knowing that, okay, cool, my car is 100% ready. If I do want to throw more boost at it, I'm at a drag day or I'm at a track day or some form, and you know there's one guy that's giving me a bit of a hard time, or I kind of want to flex, then I can just go pop, you know, a little bit extra boost, send it a little bit, turn it back down, okay, we're good, you know. Safety of mind. Or I mean, eventually maybe you decide, you know, maybe now you've got two project cars and the other one is becoming more so like your slower project car, so you want to spruce this one up. It's just the safety of mind knowing, oh, okay, I can do it. It's not necessarily that you should do it, it's just the good conscience of mind that you can do it. I hate these American builds. I say American, sorry, it's because of YouTube. It's the only place that I have been seeing it. Apologies, don't mean to hate. My meaning is you'll end up seeing these guys that they take their cars and they get the horsepower goals that they want, and then in 2 weeks they've blown up a gearbox, and then they put in a new fancy, you know, 6 months later finally they've gotten a gearbox that can handle the power, so they put it in and they drive it. Then another like 2 months down the line the diff blew up. You know, now we have to wait another 8 months for a diff to show up, and they put the diff in. My meaning mostly is do all of the supporting mods for your car and then go in and chuck in all the horsepower that you want. So have an idea, have a goal in mind basically from the start on where you want your car to be. Where do you want your car to get to in the long run? Do you want it to be a 600 horsepower monster? Do you want it to be a 1,000 horsepower monster? Do you want it to only be like a 200 horsepower daily driver plus minus? So if it's that, yeah, go for it, you know, get all the supporting mods and stuff. I understand someone out there is going to be like, oh, but I can't engine swap, you know, have the gearbox in for my engine swap if I haven't done the engine swap yet. That I can agree with and that I can see 100%. I'd still recommend buying the box, having it there in the corner, hidden away, waiting for you so that when you do the engine swap, you chuck in the box. Rather than chucking in the engine, somehow mating it to the normal gearbox, and then the normal gearbox blows up 2 minutes down the street, and then you're going to have to swap that box in anyway. I'd rather have that box just ready, and then you could probably sell the original gearbox and get a little bit of your money back. Do you know what I mean? Instead of blowing something up, because that's fun, don't get me wrong, why not take it out, resell, so you can recoup some of your money? I know 90% of the car guys out there that are busy building their cars who might or might not be listening to this. I don't know. Sometimes these only get like 5 views. So anyway, my meaning is, you know, someone's out there listening and they know the pain of, you know, you slightly upgrading every now and then because to scrape in that extra cash. So when you're replacing something, sell the original stuff. Get your money back. That's a mistake that honestly I've even made. I've still got my original headlights. I've still got the original intake pipe. Never mind my aftermarket steel one. I've still got the original plastic one. I have no use for these things. I could be flogging them for like next to nothing at this point just so I can recuperate a little bit of cash. I understand that they probably have a set value that I could be selling them for, but I could probably sell them for like $200. I understand that that's next to nothing and I probably won't sell it for that, but my meaning is I could get an extra $200, which is extra fuel money that now I can go to a track day. So there we go. There's some recommendations for guys who are trying to look into doing the first kind of starter mods for their cars. I know you're excited to get to the turbocharging piece. I know you're excited for the extra horsepower. But if you want my honest opinion, do all of the supporting stuff. Do the suspension. You don't have to go ham with the suspension and get like race car suspension and race car sway bars, like carbon fiber fucking sway bars or something. I don't know. You don't have to go that extreme. But just maybe a little bit of a beefier spring setup so that the car, isn't as boaty. That's a problem that stock MX-5s have. Again, sorry, I'm referring to MX-5s because I have one. But a more stiff suspension setup, again, you don't have to go for a coilover setup that you can do dampening setup to however many clicks or so on and so forth. You really don't have to go that extreme. So, you can do just a basic coilover setup, basic so on and so forth. I'd recommend doing all the supporting mods. Oh, sorry, I have burpees for some reason. I recommend doing all the supporting mods. It just makes your life so much easier in the long run. Again, you don't have to go fully forged or anything like that, like I did. But be understanding, definitely do your research and find out what can the stock engine handle. For example, I know that the stock engine in these, the 1.6 anyway, is comfortable handling about 220 to 250 horsepower at the wheels anyway, with boost. So with that in mind, it was kind of just like okay, the stock internals can handle actually a little bit more than what I'm asking it to do, so we'll just leave it stock internals. It helps me save cash, especially considering that wasn't my cash I'm spending, because I had people help me with money, because I had to rebuild the engine. I didn't have to rebuild the engine to boost it, but my meaning is I would have, in my long-term plans, even if the engine was 100% sound, I probably would have wanted to rebuild it anyway when I turbocharged it. Admittedly, if it was 100% sound, I probably would have tried to save up and do forged internals and stuff. My meaning is how things worked out. But, yeah. A good clutch, also. That's also a good mod to do. But yes, I think that is... Oh, something I do actually want to mention is a lot of people end up doing short shifter kits because obviously that feels nice and... it feels good. I'd recommend doing I think it's called a bushing kit or something like that. It makes your gearbox feel a little bit stiffer, so when you put it in gear, there's not as much wobble, and you get a nice little click as it's going between gears, like you do for a stock MX-5. I'd recommend doing that. But an actual short shifter kit, what my dad was saying is it puts different leverage on the gear lever. So, okay, somebody please feel free to correct myself and my dad in the comments down below if we are incorrect. But what my dad was suggesting, he's not 100% familiar with it, so he can't comment officially, but yeah, is that it can put extra strain on the shifter because it's not shifting as much as it should be. So technically speaking, your gears should be going like this. Now, because you have a short shifter, it could be doing this. Now, I was arguing with him and I was saying, yeah, but it's kind of on the stick side, it's not on the gear side. But he was saying you don't necessarily know 100% what's happening in the box unless you strip the box apart and do it. I was arguing that the companies probably know what they're doing, and they probably did strip apart the box to make sure that it's still properly working. It might not maybe be working for the synchros. Maybe the gears are still 100%, but maybe the synchros are maybe not lining up as well as they should. Somebody please feel free to comment. I'd personally avoid it just in case it is doing something that you don't want it to do. So yeah. Is there anything else I'd like to comment about? I don't really think so. So, for those of you who stayed for the first bit of the episode, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're okay. I'm here to chat if you're not doing okay. It's allowed. Some of us don't feel good sometimes, and it's 100% allowed. For those of you who just were here for the car input, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next episode, because I don't know what it's going to be, but yeah. Anyway, until next time, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Yeah, cheers.